Congratulations, Pub Day. I was able to get an early copy of this, and
thank you.
I will tell you, my children didn't get fed, my cats didn't get fed, my husband was ignored, plants died. I was so absolutely absorbed in it. But first I want to start with how you and I once met a very, very long time ago. There's no reason you will remember it, but I remembered it because you're my idol and the reason that I write.
Key West.
Yes!
Key West, of course.
Okay.
I remember it very well, yes.
So we sat across from each other, quite accidentally at a dinner with other writers, and I thought, okay, this is my idol. I'm really going to impress her. I've read so many of her books, and I'm just going to say something pretty brilliant, I'm sure. And all I could think of was I blurted out, I like the Black Dahlia too.
Oh.
Because of your short story, Black Dahlia, White Rose. So this can only go up conversation-wise.
Well, I remember a very nice conversation. I think Megan Abbott was there too.
Yes, she was.
And Jonathan Santlofer. Yeah,
Yes.
It was very pleasant. It was happier times in America too.
It absolutely was.
Some time ago.
It was. Well, we did have the parade.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you explain who Fox is, because I don't want to jump over how much you want to tell people, because it is partly in its own way a strange little mystery. There are pieces of it, but it's also a character study wrapped up inside of it. So I'm wondering if you could tell our audience, since it just came out today, a little bit about the basics of it.
The novel or the character Fox? Or...
Let's try the character is so fascinating.
Right. Well, to begin with, at the very beginning, I sort of began with this setting, which is not too far from where I live. I walk and I run, and with my late husband, we often went hiking. This area is sort of like, not a parkland because it's not that manicured, but kind of a wilderness area where there's a marshy part and there's a pond and wooded area. And we would walk there, and now I walk and hike alone, and I'm sort of drawn to look at the birds that are in the sky. So I don't remember what the design was originally, but I think I added the birds. This is like the marshy area. And these are they're scavenger birds, they're not predator birds. They're turkey buzzards and vultures, and there are quite a few of them in New Jersey. I don't know why. That's meant to be a laugh line, but it obviously didn't work. But the turkey vulture looks a bit like a turkey. It has this red head. And when you see them flying around, especially if they're circling you, it's not really a good feeling. Yeah. But they're usually somewhere, if you're in a wild area where animals die in the woods. I mean, this is nature. And there are many deer carcasses in New Jersey because there are many deer. And so I was just sort of thinking in my morbid way about what would it be like if I was actually hiking and I went to follow to see where the scavengers were, like today, you know. And then it would be this, what would be there? So that was sort of the beginning of the novel. And then I thought, you know, the next step is conjoining some character that you may have already in your memory. I mean, we all have many notes. Do you have thousands of notes?
Everywhere.
I mean, I have many outlines for novels. I could sell them at some point because I won't live long enough to write them. But I have these detailed outlines. I'll find something like in a drawer that's, it's like 30 pages of a detailed novel, and I will read it and say, it sounded promising, but somehow it didn't quite have the flame or whatever it is. And so I kind of draw upon a story that I might already have, a complete story, and then find some different form to tell it in. So with the setting of the marsh and the pond and a certain feeling, a certain tone, like almost a musical tone of creatures and melancholy smells and things, and conjoining that with a story. that was the genesis of facts.
And why did you set it in academia? Why did you make Fox basically a sociopathic teacher? I mean, talk about...
Well, just between us, and no, this can't go out of the room. The story of Francis Fox is actually based on a real person about whom I heard. And there are some fictitious elements in Francis Fox, my character. I mean, I've added some other things. But at the core of it, the idea that a middle school teacher who's a man who has so much charisma and he's just so charming and really he's actually a good teacher, that he would misuse his power over very vulnerable children, girls, that just seems to, it sort of outraged me, and the person in real life sort of got away with it. And so I guess I'm working on the compensation in art, you know, that this is like the exemplary story was what happens to Francis Fox. But in real life, often predators get away with it. They get away with it mainly because the girls whom they victimize genuinely love them, and they won't inform on them. Some of them never do.
Well, it's interesting because being in his mind is a very tricky thing because you're in a predator's mind, and he certainly does not think of himself that way. He's always like, well, what was I to do? These girls were trying to seduce me. What was I to do that these girls, you know, kept hanging around outside my office? So he clearly doesn't think of himself that way.
Well, many people, I think, would probably victimize others if they had the power and the charisma. Most people don't have that dark charisma that they would even have the temptation. So, well, Fox is also sort of an antisocial person. He's not, in a way, not exactly a sociopath, but he's very much on a penumbra of civilization. Like he doesn't feel any identification with his generation or with, particularly with his parents. He's able to sort of look at people in a way I might almost say is objective. I mean, most of us feel affection and protectiveness for relatives, let's say, and friends. But Fox is the sort of person who would look at somebody whom he actually likes, but very objectively and coldly. Yeah. And so it's sort of an exploration of a certain kind of person. I find I'm not like that myself. I'm actually very sentimental, and I don't want to hurt anybody at all, which is hard if you're teaching. I mean, you sort of have to always be very positive. But Fox is not like that, you know. And the things that he does that I don't do, but I think are sort of funny, like he's reading the students' work, and he's devised a way to read it like in 1 second. You know, his eyes go around it, and then he marks it. At the same time, he's watching a video on his lap. It's sort of like the parody of what you think a bad teacher would be doing.
Right.
It's like the equivalent of Bad Lieutenant, you know, the movie?
Sure.
That's like bad teacher. But yet he's actually quite charming. And I think if you we all meet people like this all the time, and we like them, we just don't know how really horrible they are.
Mm-hmm. Or sometimes sometimes I do know how horrible someone is, but they're so charming that I'm kind of like, I like that you're so good at this that I'm kind of going along with you. Like, I'm colluding with you in my own demise in a way.
Well, I think that we have many public officials, you know, elected people who become elected because they have this charisma of some kind. It may be totally artificial. It may be mirroring to an audience that which the audience wants, so that there's a kind of reciprocal hypnosis. But they are not really like that. We have this phenomenon in the United States of people pretending to be non-elite. You know, they may have gone to Princeton or Yale or Harvard, but they're sort of anti-elite. And that seems to go over with voters. So there's a certain kind of pseudo-sincerity or hypocrisy that works with voters. And if you want to get elected, I guess you sort of have to play that role. So at some point, somebody says, well, what would Fox have to do to get people to turn against him? And the answer is really, there's like nothing nothing some people can do. Their cult followers will always follow them. And I do find that outrageous, but it's a fact of life.
Well, there's even a girl in his class, Eunice, who refused to succumb to his charms, right? And she's this kind of, he refers to her as different types of animals. You know, and you start actually soaking it in. He calls her ferret-faced and rat, and all these different names for her, as opposed to the kittens, which are the girls he really likes.
And we're cat people. We
yeah.
just want to establish that in case.
We were backstage comparing cats.
So if there are cat people in the audience.
But I love that he tries to get her to bow to his will by using the Skinner approach on her and letting her never know if she's doing well, and the grades are all over the place, and she's put really off guard. And then her mom comes to speak with him and see what she can do, and he immediately lures her into the spell too, because he's so charming. So then she's colluding with him to degrade her daughter in a way that she doesn't deserve. So you really see his power.
Have you ever taught?
My parents were both community college teachers, but I would be horrible.
You never taught.
I would be horrible.
Oh no, you'd be wonderful. But I'm sure there are teachers in the audience. Well, when you're teaching, you depend upon a kind of goodwill in the class that people have elected to come and they want to learn something. And there's usually a feeling almost of solicitude for one another and sympathy for the teacher. But if you're just one student in the class who's sitting there like this, or yawning or looking at a cell phone or something, that really violates the whole equilibrium, and that the atmosphere is thrown off. So Fox is so sensitive, like on the first day of school or so, he can pick out the potential people in the class who are going to disrupt that. And then he does what he can to disarm them, the different tactics that he uses. It is sort of Skinnerian. B.F. Skinner is somebody whom I read, and my late husband was a neuroscientist and a psychologist, so I was reading a good deal about Skinner and reinforcing certain kinds of behavior. We all do that without necessarily being conscious of it, but a teacher like Fox definitely is very conscious of that. Mm-hmm. When I was a student, I was probably always a good student. I wasn't necessarily conscious of it, but I would be the kind of student who would be taking notes and looking up and nodding, and really I was very interested. But I do remember that there would be students like sitting at the back of the room who were kind of, not playing along with it, and how that would throw off the teacher. It's sort of unsocial. So Eunice is doing that in the class, not necessarily consciously, but she's unhappy because her father and mother are getting divorced. So she gets drawn into his orbit. He wants to control people.
Well, and so he has a special after-school class called the Looking Glass Club. Do I have it right? And it's a reference to Alice, who another thing you and I both have in common was an obsession with Alice in Wonderland, an absolute obsession. That was our gateway to books in a way.
Yes.
And there's also, I feel like, little crumbs of showing. He's hiding in plain sight, showing people his predatory nature in a way, because of course Lewis Carroll was obsessed with Alice Little, and that's how Alice in Wonderland came to be. He's got a bust of Edgar Allan Poe, who married his extremely young cousin Virginia. He loves Balthus, which, Thérèse dreaming. I think people tried to get it removed from the gallery here because it's so sensual about a young girl. And so he has all these little pieces. And Edgar Allan Poe, of course, had that favorite quote of mine, which is, the death of a beautiful woman is the most lyrical thing in the world, or poetical thing in the world.
Yes, I've quoted that too, yeah.
So he has pieces of it. And I was going to ask you, because I don't know how much you were doing it on purpose or aware of it, but for me, I could stand to be in Fox's head. And Fox is, what he's doing is a terrible, terrible thing. You're in his head quite a bit, but it's in this dream-like way. The pieces that you write like that feel to me like flowing down a river, like on a golden day, the Alice in Wonderland poem. I feel very dreamlike. And of course the girls are sort of dreamy, and I'm curious about that.
Well, Fox, as I was saying before, has a kind of objective view of things. Like people are chattering away like at a dinner party, and he's completely bored, he's not even listening. But he knows that he has to play the role, so he'll say the appropriate thing. And I think that for many people, not that we're really like Fox at all, but there is a certain role that we play in society that is not exactly hypocritical, but you're sort of in the scene. You imagine like a scene at a dinner party or with relatives where with part of your mind you're listening to them, other part of your mind you're totally somewhere else thinking about something that's more important to you. So to me, when I was creating Fox on the page, I was inhabiting that sensibility that is just extremely objective. You know, it really is the case sometimes that some people are chattering away obliviously and are not interesting. It's just that Fox is able to simulate that interest. Mm-hmm. The only part of the world, of the great richness of the world that really means anything to him is the area of fantasy that he can't control, which, and I'm sure Gillian is well aware of this because of you've done research and things like this. Serial killers and others are driven by very violent fantasies. And Fox is not exactly, he's not a serial killer, but it wouldn't take that much to make him one. He's in the grip of fantasy. Baltus could spend years on some of those canvases. They're quite large and they're very dreamy adolescent girls. It's hard for me to even comprehend how anybody could spend so much time in that kind of quasi-hallucinatory, trance-like world. I just finished reviewing, I guess I shouldn't be saying this, but I was just finishing reading a book where Ted Bundy is discussed quite a bit. And he was a fantasist. You know, he would do things so impulsively and really insanely. And most serial killers are driven by these dark fantasies that they can't control. And Fox is sort of in that vein. The only aspect of life that makes them come alive is something that society considers a taboo.
Yes. Yes.
Now, if you don't have that, I mean, I don't actually have that kind of, most of us don't. We're very lucky, but we were born immune to it. But I've done research and written about serial killers, and it starts in when they're maybe pubescent, and they get these dark fantasies, and the whole erotic component of their lives is fixated on something that society considers a taboo. I think they can try to break the spell, and maybe they can break it. But a pedophile is somebody who can't really have erotic feelings for someone his own age. He may even get married. Humbert is, I guess, the most famous example of someone who gets married. He has a normal wife, but he's fixated on Lolita.
And Fox, almost like an alcoholic, keeps swearing. He's been passed from school to school, and the lawyers will get involved, and he ends up with these great recommendations instead of being spurned and turned away, which we all recognize that pattern, certainly. And each time he says, this time I'm not going to do it. This time I'm not going to do it. Oh, well, by the time I'm a certain age, then I won't be doing it anymore.
He'll marry a woman, a grown-up woman.
Yeah.
Well, I think we were well aware, especially since post-Me Too, that pedophiles and victimizers of women don't really exist by themselves. They're kind of enabled. There's usually like a little group of people who are kind of vaguely aware that they're sociopaths. Harvey Weinstein is a good example. Evidently, there's a whole network of people who would sort of make these appointments or reserve hotel rooms for him and these women. And they sort of knew that they shouldn't be doing that, but they were on his payroll, or they were beholden to him in some way. So too with Fox, there's a little group of people, the headmistress, who should know that he's a predator, but they don't want to know about it. We saw that in great numbers in the Catholic Church for quite a while. I hope it's sort of winding down or gone now, but where a priest who had victimized either boys or girls would be passed on to other parishes and given good recommendations.
Yes, exactly. Now, is that why you said it? You said it in 2013, I noticed. And does that have anything with Me Too and trying to place it in a world before that was more identifiable?
No, it has to be said at that time because one of the characters grows up and we see her in the present time.
You want her in the present
So
time.
I had to set it.
Backtrack.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I do that a lot in my writing where somebody has to grow up or get older, so I have to set it back at a certain amount of time. But I tried to make it ahistoric, like whoever was president or whatever was going on. Historically, I don't put that in a novel usually.
Right. Yeah, it's almost of its own time. To me, sometimes it feels, when you're in Fox's mind, almost antique. You know, he considers himself, I think, above time almost, and that maybe of an old-fashioned era.
Yeah, and there are characters in novels often who don't have cell phones, and most writers don't want to get involved in all the technical side because it becomes obsolete very soon.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I was looking at a movie maybe the other night. I can't remember when it was set, but already the technology, somebody had a funny-looking cell phone, or their computers that are the wrong size, and that kind of technology changes so rapidly that if you put it in your work, it seems really to date it.
It's like the famous Michael Douglas scene in Wall Street where he's on the beach and he's talking on the phone, and it's supposed to be he's so rich, he's got this special phone that literally is like a shoebox size, and you know that does. I never put, if I can avoid it.
It's good not to do that. Yeah.
And for me, it's trickier and trickier to write a mystery because now there are Nest cameras everywhere. I'm always complaining to my husband, like, how do you kill someone anymore?
Yes, also cell phones, people would be connecting with one another. But the forensics of that also allows for more kinds of detection, forensic science and looking into. Like forensic computer science, I use a little bit of that in my novel, just a tiny bit. But the forensic is also developing, and so that's so interesting to read about.
Yeah, to read about, but less to write about. I feel like it's very, I was trying to do a chapter in which it felt like a teenager, how they get interrupted by texts and how they can't get through their day.
Yeah,
and it was the worst chapter in the world. It was so annoying. I was like, why is this phone interrupting my chapter? So I just scrapped it.
Yeah, I think at the very beginning of this technology, there was more people attempted to integrate it with the work. Like there could be a story that was all text messages. But now those seem very dated, like who cares? It's not really that important.
Changes the subject just a little bit. I find, this is about sexual predation, and I find that you and I are very interested thematically often about violence toward women and at women. And I love this quote. It is from Black Dahlia White Rose, which is an imagination of what if Marilyn Monroe was roommates with Betty Short, who was horrifically murdered in a famous true crime story. And there's a line in there that says, always in that instant, if you are female, an instinct comes to you. Can this one be handled or no? And if no, flee. And that to me reminds me of a lot of Fox, like they're in over their heads. And it's I feel like many of your stories are, where are you going, where have you been? Like this feeling that you are suddenly in a place where something's gone very wrong.
Yes, I think that may be one distinction. Now there may be some overlap, but I think between men and women, or girls and boys, There may be some slight real distinction. A woman or a girl walking alone or running, hiking, will have a certain feeling of sudden self-consciousness if somebody comes on the scene, you see somebody in a penumbra of your vision. I would guess that the average man or boy in this literally the same situation wouldn't have quite that feeling. Yeah. I don't think it's meant to be paranoid at all. Just that a lone woman in a lone place, all remote, is actually more vulnerable than a man. Yeah. Now, I've heard tall men talk about, I think it was Andre Dubus, the writer, who was a big man. He may have been a Marine at one point. He's not living now. His son, Andre Dubus III, is a very good writer. But the father, I think he said that when he walked in a tavern, he was likely to be the biggest man there, the tallest man, and that it just exudes a sense of very well-being. Yeah. And I thought reading that really allowed me to know something, because a woman would almost never have that feeling. No. Like if you're a statuesque, beautiful woman with high heels and you walk into a place, you don't feel invulnerable. You feel very much vulnerable and looked at.
Yeah. So you feel seen, but in a way that is not a healthy, safe way of feeling seen. And I always tell my husband's 6'3", tall guy. Oh. Very hello, husband. Very nice.
Where is he?
There he is. And I always tell him, you're never going to understand what it's like to be me. A woman always has to, again, not being paranoid, but there is always this sense in the back of your mind that I could leave my house today and never come back. There is a possibility of that. And to be a man and never have to think that, I can't imagine how wonderful that must feel.
Well, not to change the subject in a provocative way, but also to be white.
Yeah, sure.
Like a white man who's 6'3", you could forgive them for swaggering. I mean, let's face it. Yeah. But a girl, a woman, there's just the different categories of the kind of authority. So too, it's said that when a man walks into a classroom, like when Fox comes in, he's teaching 7th and 8th grade kids. He walks in the classroom, he's a man, and they haven't had any male teachers. They have nice women teachers who are pleasing and smiling. And he walks in, and he's just got their absolute, they idolized him almost immediately. He just walks right into it. Whereas a woman, especially a young woman teaching high school, she has to sort of, even if they're nice kids, she sort of has to get that authority and that kind of reverence for the role, where the man just is given it.
Yeah. There's a great line in it that says he wields his maleness like a scepter.
Yeah, and he's basically a nice person. He's actually a good teacher. He really encourages students, and he does something that I would consider doing myself if I taught that kind of class. Not giving grades to some people who haven't actually done very well, telling them that they can rewrite it and hand it back, and then giving them a nice grade to kind of reward them for rewriting. To me, that's Skinnerian behaviorism, where you reward good behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's very positive. And then he teaches Eunice, to one of his girl students, he teaches her to write much better than she was. He gives her a way of writing with her left hand, like writing something unexpected. So he does monstrous things, but I don't think of him as a monster, 100%. Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the same time, when he's talking about Eunice, he says, he's talking to her mom, and he says, it's so interesting that parents assume that you have goodwill toward their child and that you're both working together. And he says, when actually what I'm out for is revenge, because she won't like him the way she's, and he's not attracted to her the way he is the kittens. He just wants her encouragement and the respect he thinks he deserves.
At one point, I was thinking about the scene in A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, when Stephen Dedalus is teaching, and he has these students who are Dubliners, and some of them are very working class, and they're really not all that bright. So Stephen, of course, is James Joyce, basically. He's this very, very brilliant, elegant kind of person. And he looks at one of the pupils, and this pathetic pupil who isn't smart, isn't attractive, is kind of physically diminutive, and he thinks only the mother loves him. That if you take away that mother, this creature is so vulnerable. That's always stayed with me, that observation of Stephen's, a kind of a bachelor who's glancing around a classroom, that there are people in the classroom who are only able to somehow survive because one person loves them. And so too, Fox thinks of things like that. This girl is so unattractive, and she's sort of a nasty girl in some ways, but her parents love her. And he's kind of wondering and, in a way, stunned and perplexed by what that kind of love would be like, because he doesn't feel that. Mm-hmm. It's like we might have a cat or a dog who becomes handicapped or lame or is elderly, and somebody would look at us and say, why would you care about that elderly dog? But we don't feel that way. Yeah. Because we don't see an elderly dog, we see our dog. So Fox is missing that, which he couldn't have a dog. I mean, he pretends to have a dog, but he doesn't have a dog because he doesn't have that kind of personality.
Right. Yeah, he's able to be what is necessary at any given time, but there's almost like there's not much that's actually there.
Well, the one thing I really enjoyed about Fox is that I could write about a dog for a change, because as a cat person, I actually like dogs. It's just that I don't happen to have a dog. So I thought, I'm going to write a whole chapter from the point of view of a little dog. And it was just so exciting and so thrilling. And even though I have no way of knowing if it's authentic, it's sort of the dog is guided. She's guided by her smells. And she smells all these wonderful things, which we don't have that capacity. Human beings smell just a tiny little bit of what's out there. But the dogs, they're just sniffing, and it's a world of these wonderful scents. They're so excited. And if they smell something that's rancid or rotting, like dying, dead meat, carrion, they are so excited by that. We are the opposite.
Less so.
Yeah, the dog is just rushing along, and her tongue is out, and she's so excited. And I do like to run, and I was sort of describing what it's like to be running on 4 legs.
Well, I will admit, I opened the first chapter, and I was like, okay, that's from the point of view of a puppy. Is JCO going soft on me? And then it finds something very dark and creepy, so I knew we were back okay.
And did you notice later on the dog has been kind of corrupted, and the dog is looking at her master in this kind of salivating way, thinking it really got very dark at that point. So someone said to me, I think it was my editor, David, could we go back to the little dog? And I said, I think I'm going to stay away from the dog, because the dog was going in a certain dark direction, and the dog actually is corrupted by Fox too. I mean, almost literally corrupted. But I didn't want to make too much of that, because dog lovers would be angry.
Yeah, it's true. They're not as fiercely loyal as cat lovers, perhaps, in a different way.
Well, is it true for you, as it is for me, that no cats will be harmed in our novels?
No cats will be harmed.
Yeah. No cats will be harmed. It's a promise, yes.
Yeah, I have 2 black cats who help me write my novels by jumping on a keyboard whenever I'm near a keyboard. Click, 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 click.
Well, sometimes they lie with their tail across the keyboard, and you actually can't interrupt them. You just have to sit there. Just sit there for a while till they move the tail.
Definitely. I mean, you do a lot of head hopping in this book, which I think is so interesting. You're in this dreamy, like daydreamy world of Fox, and then you'll bop into Marianne's world. And Marianne is one of the not kittens because she is very fully developed, aggressively womanly developed for a 12-year-old, I think she is. And you're in your head as you're absorbing what it's like to be her, and from Fox's point of view in particular. And I think the chapter that introduces her is called Dirty Girl. Is that right?
Yes, she's a very sympathetic girl whose idea of life is to grow up and be a librarian. But she's so fully developed. There's actually a strange phenomenon of girls in contemporary times who come to puberty when they're very young, like 7 or 8. It's very it's unnatural in the history of the Homo sapiens. But it's more and more a phenomenon. So little girls who develop breasts when they're very young, they are they're so regarded by people looking at them, staring at them, that it's very difficult for them. I was very sympathetic with her.
Yeah. Well, it does remind me of Pieces of Blonde when you're talking about Marilyn
Yes,
Monroe.
yes,
And
Marilyn
how
Monroe,
ostracized she is because she developed so early, and how teased and tormented and bullied she is.
Yes, that's so true. That's very true.
And Pieces of Foxfire, too. There's a character in Foxfire
Yes.
who also is singled out and tormented by a teacher.
That's so true. Well, you have a good memory.
I've been studying.
But speaking from moving from point of view, you do that so well. In Gone Girl, you have these 2 pretty distinct voices, and then is it dark? What is it? Dark Places?
Dark Places? Uh-huh.
Yeah. Then you have like 3 characters. That's right, just 3.
3 characters,
yeah.
yes.
And they're pretty different. And I could see that you're attracted to the same sort of drama that I am, because by having 2 voices or 3 that are alternating, I might have 4, maybe I have 5 in my novel. You get a little dramatic jump just by going from one to the other. It's like a movie where you're cutting around different perspectives. But if you stay with one perspective for the whole novel or the whole movie, it's much more in danger of being stagnant.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting that little jump that you would get from a different scene.
And I will admit, it's just more interesting to write. But writing is, people don't understand, like, writing is a slog sometimes. Writing can be wonderful and thrilling, but it can also just be boring and painful and tedious.
If you had the experience the next time that you feel you're a little bored, start the next chapter from the point of view of your cat. The cat is looking up at this person who's at the typewriter, Suddenly, just that whole new angle will take you to a different place.
It's like that Far Side cartoon. Have you seen it, where he's talking to the dog and it's like, meow, 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 Misty, meow, 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 meow. And the dog isn't listening to anything except that one word. So I think that'd be me and Gary Carl. But I have done different. When I hit a roadblock, writer's block, I never let myself stop, but I'll write something I know I'm not going to use from the book and do it from a different character's point of view, and do it from, like, with Amazing Amy, who was absolutely a sociopath. I wrote a point of view, a chapter of her roommate in boarding school and what that was like, and it just helps me get to know the characters more, and it keeps me engaged with the book instead of just throwing my hands up and going, I'll just start a new book, which is sort of what you think about doing.
Well, it's sort of like walking on a path in a somewhat wild place where the trail is overgrown, and you don't want to give up. You can find some other way to go around it.
Yeah, exactly. You keep going. And I have a speech in Gone Girl, like called the Cool Girl speech, that is about, thank you, that's sort of about, you know, women molding themselves to be what a man wants and like training themselves to like what a man wants. And that was just a writing exercise. And it was me, I had originally had Amy was kind of a women's advice columnist at a magazine, and I decided that was a little too on the nose and changed it. But I wrote what would be a magazine article about her and wrote from her point of view. And since my rule is you can't use writing exercises, I would take it out. And then I was like, oh, I really like it. I'll jam it back in. But if you actually read that section again, you'll realize that there's no reason she's thinking about this at all. There's no preemption. There's no real context. All of a sudden, she's just thinking it. But I'm so glad I put it back in.
Well, your writing is elastic enough to put lots of different things in. Though, I mean, you have a lot of detail and background where a lot of things can be put in. It's sort of like sociological realism, you know, so I think that's one of the reasons that your writing is so readable and interesting. And so it combines a sort of literary interest with the world, with a streamline, with a plot that's kind of moving along. I mean, I try to do that also. I'm really interested in realistic settings. Though I can write in a gothic vein where it's more like a dream or a nightmare, I'm very much attracted to realism, to putting a lot of things in, because that is the way we live.
Yeah. I'm trying to think how often you write in first person.
Well, I've done a lot of experimental writing, so the first person would be, it could be anything. It wouldn't be my voice, the mediated voice. I've done all sorts of different perspectives. The collective we is interesting to work with too, like a whole collective, and using the second person pronoun you. That can be, have you ever done that?
No, I'm not brave enough to do that.
Oh, you can do that sometime. I mean, it's a very special mode of fiction because you're addressing the reader as if the reader is you. So it can really work very well. I think particularly for short pieces. I'm not sure for a whole novel if it would work. But yeah, there are different things. And then the omniscient point of view, which you're like a camera, it's like a movie, where you're in a setting and the characters come into the view. You know, that's another way of writing. And then Cormac McCarthy has a way of writing that's very Olympian and almost biblical, like Old Testament prophet-like voice, where it's very oracular and Vatic. And then a writer like, Kurt Vonnegut would be a good example, very, very colloquial, almost like teenager kind of, talk, with the vocabulary is very, it's very simple and clear. And all these ways of writing are ways of telling stories. And each one will make the same story very different.
Oh, yes. Now, you've mentioned movies a couple times, or talking about books as the idea of scenes, and you've mentioned movies within your books, certainly, and obviously Blonde. I'm curious about your pop culture taste. Do you watch a lot of movies? Do you listen, I know Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been was dedicated to Bob Dylan. Like, I'm curious about your intake and what you're listening to right now or watching, and if that affects your writing.
Well, I'm interested probably in things that are pretty common. I mean, I like Succession, and before that I like Mad Men. I like Peaky Blinders a good deal. The Sopranos, of course, is such a classic. I mean, many of the things that I like, everybody likes. So, The Americans.
Oh yeah.
Breaking Bad. I mean, a whole lot of wonderful things. And in terms of music, I'm more interested in classical music. Excuse me. More classical music.
Do you watch true crime? Do you read true crime? Because you and I write a lot about true crime or things that are inspired by true crime.
Well, I mentioned I had just reviewed a book where Ted Bundy was a subject. So it's not that I've done a lot of that, but but I did do that.
Well, I think of Black Dahlia, I'm thinking of Black Water, which is a dash of, certainly about debatable crime. There are several other things that feel that they have a certain amount of reflection.
Well, in one chapter in my novel, a woman's watching Forensic Files. So I sometimes watch, when I look at Forensic Files, it's easy to be very drawn up into the mystery, but then when it's over, you tend to forget it. So it's true crime, but it doesn't have much memory. So if you watch a Forensic File, it's possible you're watching the same things over again over the years, which is not. It's not like Peaky Blinders or Succession, which are really brilliantly written, so that it's literary. You're taken to another level. With documentary true crime, I think it's basically easy to forget.
I will tell you, and this stays in the room, for about the past 3 to 4 years, every night what I fall asleep to is the audiobook of Fatal Vision by Joe McGinnis. Just over and over, and my poor husband, it'll link up to our car when he's getting ready to take the children to school, and it'll be like, and she was stabbed 42 times, and and he's like trying to turn, but I don't know why. That's all I can take in. It's all that will get me to sleep.
Well, I haven't read or heard that, but is that the one where a husband killed the wife?
It's the Green Beret guy, and he blames it on a Manson-like cult that makes no sense. Yeah.
I think I read reviews of it, maybe by Janet Malcolm or someone.
Yes, because she wrote Journalist and the Murderer, talking about her, his experience and what a journalist owes to their subject.
Yeah, that was right. Is there some reason why you're...
That's what I'm asking you. I saw you could
Well, I
me.
I can't imagine, more than once.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's healthy. If anyone has ideas out there for me, let me know. All right, we'll switch over to some...
I tend to read and reread Emily Dickinson's poetry, so...
Oh, that's healthier.
This is a difference.
That's healthier.
We're pretty much alike, except for...
When writing psychologically flawed characters, do you create a profile of their traits, interests, etc., or do you just write and see how they flow? It's a question for both of us. I will say I create a profile of their traits. I'm like a method writer almost. I do a playlist for them. I have an old-fashioned sort of creative writing thing where it's questions like, do they eat breakfast? If so, what do they eat? Do they remember people's birthdays? Do they, and it goes on, and it really does kind of help me flesh out. It forces me to create that person's very strange little question, what's their favorite TV show and that type of stuff. So yes, I do.
Well, I'm probably a little different. All my writing starts with me being in some place outdoors, walking or running or just wandering around. So I start thinking about what I'm going to be writing. It may be something completely new, or it may be working on a novel. So I try to just see the scene as if it's a movie. I spend a lot of time just thinking and then looking out the window. So to me, the character comes, in a sense, almost fully formed, like a person appearing out of a mist, that I can see Francis Fox very easily. I know what he's wearing. I have a whole sense of what his favorite food would be or drink. It sort of comes, it sounds more mystical than it probably is. I spend a lot of time, it can be hours, really hours or even days or weeks or months, walking or running or thinking about these characters. So I never make any lists of anything. I tell my students, I teach creative writing every semester basically, and I tell students not to start writing and actually writing words, on a computer, to go out for a long walk and think of a story all the way through to the end. and don't come back, and you can't have dinner until you get to the end. Whether you're out for 2 hours, you just walk and walk and walk and think of that story, and including the ending. You know, if people would do that very systematically and meditatively, they wouldn't have to do a whole lot of first drafts and things that they throw away because they've already gotten to the end. But I do have students and friends who write without knowing the ending. So they'll get to a certain point where they start going the wrong way, then they have to throw that out, and then they try something else and throw that out. Then they finally get the right ending, but they could have actually gotten that right ending, 6 months before if they just stayed with thinking.
See, for me, that's not true. I have to write my way. I write a whole book and then kind of tear it back and tear it apart. But for me, I've only written 3 books now, but that's always the way I think that I can know the ending. And I do think about it a lot. I walk every day in the middle of the day. I don't take any technology with me. I think about what I've written that in the morning, and technology is your enemy. I always say that for creativity. And then I think what I'm going to write in the afternoon, but I still go off track. I don't know what's wrong with me.
But that's good, because it's like the way James Joyce planned Ulysses. It's pretty much planned. He planned it when he planned Mr. Hunter's Day. It was going to be the last story in Dubliners. So you can see he was planning that much earlier, the story of Ulysses. But then when it took 7 years to write it, with all the outlines and everything, each day he would be inventing something. Like it's sort of like letting the air in. You do have an outline, you do know the ending, you definitely know the ending, but then how do you get there? So it's that intuition that makes the writing so exciting.
Yeah. This is from Noreen from NYC. If you could spend a day with a writer, living or dead, and besides each other, thank you for lowering that pressure, who would it be and what would you like to do?
Do you want to answer?
Oh, I have to think on it. I'm gonna go Mark Twain, actually.
Oh, he would be fun.
He would be really fun.
Great. But you want to get him at the right time in his life, because when he was old, he was very clinically depressed.
Oh, yeah, I'll get him early then.
Yeah, when his wife and daughter was still alive.
Okay.
After his little girl died, he just fell apart. Susie died, and then his wife died. That was it. He was really finished. So, but before that, I think he was probably lots of fun. Yeah. People live long lives, and sometimes they're happy, and sometimes they're not so happy. And near the end of their lives, they've lost so many people that they are really not the same person that they were when they were 30. Who would I like to spend time with? I feel very, very close emotionally or temperamentally to Emily Dickinson. I think that I don't know that I could have been friendly with her in the sense that I don't think she would reciprocate her friendship. She was very close to her sister-in-law who lived next door, and to some women, just a few people whom she knew quite intimately. But I don't think she was somebody that you could befriend, whereas I think Mark Twain,
He'd be jolly at the right time.
Yeah, he would take you out for a drink.
Friend of a beer with, exactly.
Yeah, and you'd be the best friends, and he would adore you.
We would be on the riverboat back in my home state of Missouri, I think.
So I would say Emily Dickinson. Now, I'm very attracted to Kafka. He was very important in my writing at one time. But there's almost no way that one could get close to Kafka, I think.
Yeah. Less of a beer on a riverboat kind of guy.
No, he was... And then the women he was close to, he was so neurotic, sort of like a parody of Woody Allen or somebody. Yeah. Just so incredibly neurotic about them that if you were very close and intimate with him, then it was almost like the worst way to approach him. He couldn't stand that, so there was almost no way to approach someone like that.
Don't meet your heroes sometimes is what the answer is, right? There's certain people that I would admire, but I don't think I would want to spend the day with them.
Exactly.
You write across every genre. Is there anything you won't try? Could we ever expect Joyce Carol Oates, the musical?
Well, I don't think I could write a limerick. It's just long. I mean, anybody can write a limerick, but a really good limerick, I think, is very challenging. And music, I couldn't compose music, so.
There was a gal named Joyce Oates. I'll start with that. We can roll with it. What do you think of the current popularity of dark academia among younger audiences?
Well, that is very interesting. Somebody was asking me about that earlier today. When I was writing Fox, I wasn't aware there was this sort of subgenre, dark academia. I guess it goes back to The Secret History of Dead at Heart, maybe. Yeah, I wasn't actually aware that was a category because I've been teaching so long, mostly at Princeton University, also at NYU, because I've been teaching so long, and I know my colleagues and so forth. I would say the idea of dark academia is pretty ridiculous. Have you ever been at a department meeting or, you know, the average teacher is a nice person, and the whole dark side of it is pretty much like vampires that don't exist, but they're in literature.
Like I said, both my parents are community college professors, so I'm a big pro teacher. They are weirdly not dark. They had me.
No, they're not at all. They tend to be pretty mostly liberal, activists, good people. Yeah, just kind of nice people. And you can't do much with them in a book.
Nice. I mean, real quick, just a side note. I find it very hard to write nice people. And I don't know what that says about me, but I have tried to write nice people before. And for instance, if anyone has read Dark Places, my second book, the main character, Libby, I was literally like, I'd come off Sharp Objects, that had a dark female character who was, self-harm and alcoholic. And I was writing Libby, and she had survived the axe murder of her family. And I was like, I'm going to make her really peppy. Because I don't want to be known as dark female narrator woman. And you say, oh, well, that turned out for me. But I couldn't do it. It sounded completely false.
Well, it's almost impossible to do. If you look at the brothers Karamazov, Father Zosima and Alyosha are the least interesting characters, This is very well known. Yeah. In Paradise Lost, it's Lucifer who's interesting. Yeah. The God character, the nice people are so boring.
Good in life, not in books. And the last one for tonight is, all 650 plus pages felt necessary. What was the editing process like? Was it much longer at one point?
Is this novel?
Yes.
This person has read the novel already?
I guess I got a hold of it early.
Wow, who's that person? That person is
Speed reader.
Unusual. The question was?
Did it start out longer, or what was the editing process for it like?
No, it started off much shorter. My novel, Blonde, that ended up like 800 or 900 pages, I was aiming for about 180 pages.
What?
Yeah. That's a good example of what we were talking about before, that you can plan for something. But at that time, I wasn't able to imagine the whole novel. Blonde was supposed to be a postmodernist short novella type experimental work in which it ends with the word Marilyn Monroe. In other words, Norma Jean Baker was given that name when she was just basically a starlet. And Betty Grable was considered too old. She was probably 40. And some other stars were too old. And so they were grooming this young girl, Norma Jean Baker, but they wanted to find a name for her. So they were sort of thinking Marilyn, and Marilyn may have been a name that Norma Jean had in her family. She supplied it. So the name was going to end the whole novel. Then, because it was postmodernist, meaning you have to supply what comes next. But then when I got to that part of the novel, it was already like 400 pages. And I thought, oh my God, the big part of the whole story is ahead. after she's Marilyn Monroe. So I have to completely recast the thought for the novel. It was no longer this postmodernist work, but an epic, more like Moby Dick or something. You know, it had a lot of popular culture and politics and history in it. It wasn't a sleek postmodernist work, but something much bigger. And though it was very disastrous emotionally for me, it was very difficult to get through that. I really miss it. I miss the misery. You've never had this experience, Gillian, when you have 999 pages and then it goes to the fourth digit. The fourth digit is like a crossing of the river Styx. You think, I can't believe it. I had like 1,400 pages in manuscript, but I was totally exhausted by it.
Oh, sure.
It was just really, really arduous. But at the same time, I sort of wish that I could do something like that again.
Well, tell me, before we go, tell me the difference, because now I'm fascinated of your much shorter books like Zombie or Black Water or Rape, a Love Story. You know, how did those end up as slim as they are and not turn into something bigger?
Well, I love the novella. To me, Henry James said the novella is a divine form. Say a novella could be 200 pages or a little less. I love that form. But you can't always deal with what you want to deal with. Zombie was first a short story. I saw it in print in the New Yorker and I thought, what? The second part of it's missing. I mean, wow, it just sort of ended at the part where it should have been beginning. So then I wrote that, but there wasn't the material for anything longer. It's sort of like if you're in a small plane and you have to land, you're landing your own plane and the runway's this long and it's too short, you have to go around and come back and come differently. Writing the short form is in some ways more difficult than a longer form. Have you ever written a short?
I've written one novella.
Yeah. Was it hard to do?
Oh, much harder than my novels. I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
No.
Well, The Turn of the Screw is maybe a short novel. I'm not sure what you would call it. But James almost never did anything quite like that. Again, that was really a brilliant work. But everything fell into place, and it just somehow, there's that short runway, and he was able to land the plane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Do you have a favorite of your shorter ones?
Well, Zombie, I do like quite a bit. Rape, a Love Story. Black Water.
Black Water is
Yeah.
just...
Well, Black Water was the form of the ballad. I used the ballad form of the stanzas, incremental repetition, telling a story and then always having the same line. And the black water filled her lungs, comma, and she died is the last line of each little chapter. They're very short. So it's said that if we drown, we don't drown continuously, but we kind of come back to consciousness, and it's not usually a steady decline. So she's drowning by degrees, and then at the end, it's just like that's the final line. But if I had to write that without the ballad form, I don't think I could have done it quite as effectively.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That moment when she says, is this it? Is this how I'm going to die? It's like one of the most brutal.
Yeah. Because in moments of catastrophe, like a car is tumbling over, evidently time is slowed, and you do have a time to think about it. You could get in there and write a whole work where the moments are very slow, and then it would end. It would sort of come to an end.
Well, I do also want to thank you for Foxfire, because that's one of my personal...
Oh, thank you.
Legs Sadovsky is one of my all-time... I tried to get people to call me Legs for a while. It did not take.
Oh, I love the girls, too.
Man,
yeah.
I mean, just wonderful.
Yeah, and I was sort of Maddie Monkey with the typewriter.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for spending your pub night with us. Fox, Joyce Carol